On today's episode of Supernormalized, we're talking to Mark Burnett. He came into the world at Camp Lejeune in 1958 and carried the legacy of that place for decades. Unexplained nerve pain, balance loss, and eventually clinical diagnosis of Parkinson's and early Alzheimer's disease. Trained as a database programmer, Mark treated his symptoms like a stubborn bug to be fixed. He followed a trail from a Japanese university study to a tiny seed that is used in traditional Chinese medicine. He engineered a cold mill process to preserve fragile compounds and began a personal trial that changed his life. Suddenly, he was getting fewer falls, near-gone tremors, sharper memory, and measurable improvement on his blood tests. He founded a company called APDI and My Brain Restore to make that process available to others while continuing clinical testing and legal action tied to Camp Lejeune exposure. On this episode, we'll talk with Mark about his medical tests, the science behind the seed in the ultra-chill milling process, practical directions for caregivers and patients, and the ethics of regulation and questions around self-experimentation and supplements, and the legal and community fight tied to environmental toxins. Stay tuned for details on Mark's experience on how he discovered this and how he's turned it into a product that actually helps people with their Parkinson's and the Alzheimer's. This supplement is changing so many people across the world, and this is a great story. Welcome to Supernormalized, Mark Burnett. Mark, it's like you must have signed up to, I don't know, a pretty strange sort of life to be able to come into the world and then be forced into a position to find your way back to health. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing how this all happened. I mean, your early life was pretty rough, and it wasn't by your own hand or the hand of your parents or anything like that. It was more so just by circumstance. Do you want to actually go into that sort of detail and tell us about that first moment when you realized something serious was happening with your balance and memory and how that all came about?
Right, sure. Well, essentially, I was born in Camp Lejeune, which was a contaminated base. But of course, at that time, during my teens and my even early 30s, I didn't know really what was going on. I knew that I had some neurological issues, but no doctors could really figure it out. I had root canals in all my teeth for no particular reason. No one could figure out why. My teeth were hypersensitive. And all these things kept driving me, I guess, in different directions here as to what kind of problem I had. And it really wasn't until I got into my 60s and started noticing more advanced kind of Parkinson's symptoms starting to come on that I started thinking about that. I knew I had talked to my mother prior to that. Why do I have no brothers and no sisters? And what had happened is on the base when I was born, my mom was sick in her second, third trimester. And the doctors were like, we're not sure we're going to be able, he's going to be able to be born.
Oh.
And I made it. A lot of babies didn't there. A lot of babies did die. It was really rough. But I made it out. And unfortunately, though, I asked my mom when I was like 13 years old, you get curious, like, why don't I have any brothers or sisters? And she said, well, let me sit down. She's a Marine wife, right? Okay. So straightforward to the point. Well, here's the deal. I was so sick on the base with you and everything else, didn't know why, but they kind of pushed me to get a hysterectomy. Now,
Oh,
all she had to
no.
leave that base and she would have been fine. But no one knew that and no one was telling anybody that at that time. So that's why I don't have any brothers and sisters. And I became an only child. And I basically, once I understood what was happening, I understood what was happening in Camp Lejeune and this contaminated water, my spirits were, let's fight this. Because I'm sort of an entrepreneur. I always have been. I've run programmers before and worked with developers and things like that. So researching and figuring out things, working from a blank screen was something I was very used to doing. I had that heart for it. So that's how I got started.
Yeah, I'm curious too that the contamination is TCE. What's that?
Well, it's a name I'm not going to try to pronounce that. It's it is essentially a chemical that probably most people have in their garage and they just don't know it. It is in brake cleaner fluid.
Oh
Okay.
my
It's in
God.
carburetor cleaner fluid. It's in wig glue. It's in the correction fluid that you use on paper. It is a chemical normally used to clean metals for the most part, but it's also used in the dry cleaning industry to clean uniforms, hence the Marines.
Oh.
And everyone went to dry cleaners. And one of the dry cleaners that wasn't on base, but was upstream from base, dumped all their TCE that they cleaned the uniforms down the drain. And
Oh,
that
no.
ran into the water supply aquifers. And I think there was like 84 wells in Camp Lejeune, and they pulled the water out from 1953 on, and I was born in 58, and we were drinking water laced with TCE. So my
Wow.
first drink was a formula because back then breastfeeding was not popular. And let's keep in
Mm.
mind, Betty Grable was out there. So there was this sort of, oh, the Marines were like, no, 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 use a bottle. And so that's what happened. I mean, I got bottle fed in the hospital. The hospital is one of the most contaminated hospitals with the water. And my first drink was that TCE water.
Wow. And that was polluting everybody and causing lots of drama that no one really could pin it to.
Well, and then there was huge amount of cover-ups going on. Base commanders were keeping it quiet. They'd put out some memos like nothing's wrong with the water. It was only until the U.S. government got involved much later, much later, and did a survey of everything that they found a bunch of contamination with TCE chemical, and which was that cleaner, and benzene was also, which is a
Oh,
form of
God.
like gas in the water
Yeah.
system. Three other chemicals in there.
Wow.
So it was horrible. It was just drinking chemicals every day. Yeah, I mean, you go to the pool. I was a little kid. You go in the kiddie pool, right? I mean, I was like 2 years old. My mom was a big fanatic for going to pools and learning to swim early. And I was in the pool all the time. So, while that was fun, the end result, it wasn't. Um,
Yeah.
and then I got hit with, well, okay, I don't want this, Parkinson's thing. How do I deal with it?
So what happened? So your body got severely toxic, and then you started to notice symptoms of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and early age onset dementia.
Right.
How was that for you? I mean, that would have been quite disturbing to realize something was going on. You're like, well, where did that come from?
Well, besides the root canals, which involved all teeth eventually, I also at a very young age had ED, which is erectile dysfunction, which was very unnormal. Even my doctors were like, this is really weird that you would have this at such a young age. And there was no explanation for it. At that time, there was a Viagra or things like that out there. So when there was, I used it. It worked for a little while, but stopped. And that's an early sign of Parkinson's that some people don't realize. After doing
Yeah, right.
research, I realized that was a Parkinson's symptom, the damage of those nerves that create that capability. So, I knew things were wrong, but I just couldn't get any doctors to put, the sort of, check mark of what it was. It wasn't until I started doing my own research and understanding there were a lot of things going on in Camp Lejeune where I was that I started to put that together. As unfortunately during COVID, I started to bump into things. I started to take corners a little too fast or a little too sharp, I should say, and fall down, falling upstairs and downstairs. So either one's
Oh
fun.
God, awful. Yeah.
And you knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to go to the doctor right away because these were horrible situations going on, but I didn't want to get COVID either. And I hadn't yet. So basically, it came down to I had to focus on, what's out there. I eventually saw a neurologist and they put me on a medicine from the 1960s called Cardopa, L-Dopa type drugs, which are just replacements of dopamine. That's all they are. So they're not fixing anything. They're just replacing what's not being made by the brain. And I realized that was not good. And one doctor summed it up because they said, we call this the honeymoon effect. And I said, what is that? Besides what I know what a honeymoon effect might be. And they said, yeah, after about 5 years, this isn't going to work for you and it's going to go away. And we're going to have to increase the dose. You're going to get into worse problems. You don't beat it. It's unbeatable. It's incurable. I just couldn't deal with that. My brain was telling me, no, 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 no. You got to do more research. You got to figure it out. So that's what really got me on the path. And being a database programmer, being used to those blank screens and building an entire database for huge companies with a team of programmers I saw hired, I realized that solving any problem from a blank screen was possible. You just had to know where you're going, what your results need to be at the end, and how do you get there.
Yeah. So you're driven to actually gather all the data, all the possible data, and then using your skills as a database programmer, you would even say a computer engineer, you would
Right.
say that you actually dived right into that data and started to notice patterns that actually pointed something out.
Well, yeah, I came across a somewhat abandoned, well, I should back up a little bit. the Michael J. Fox Association Foundation group and the Parkinson's news groups had all done a really short article about Japanese experimenting in with a natural product, but they were trying to, at the University of Japan Medical School, they were trying to figure out this product that they had found and why it cured mice of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and dementia. And when I read that, I was like, how can one thing cure three neurological diseases? That seemed
Yeah, right.
very odd to me. But again, that's where my brain, who thinks way outside the box, always, and I tend to predict things that happen eventually. I wish I could do it better with stocks.
Don't we all?
But I could see that happening. I mean, in other words, I eventually was able to find that report, the actual scientific journals that were published, and the scientists could not figure out how to take what they had seen happen with these mice after they dissected them and realized everything was clear, everything was gone, it had all cleared out, and they couldn't figure out how to make it into a drug. You couldn't beat Mother Nature. Okay,
Yeah,
that's
right.
just the way to put it. And so Big Pharma that was paying him money said, well, we can't have a $10,000 a month drug. Well, abandon the project. And that's what happened.
Mm,
But to me, it
mm.
was like, wow, that's an aha moment. Wait a minute, wait a minute. Let's go back. What did they use? And it was a plant I had never, ever heard of before. And they had used the seed from the fruit of just one particular species of that entire species line. So something gave them the incline to do that. And when I was able to actually acquire that product, which was difficult to get the way it needed to be, and it had to be made in a special way. Again, I came up with new ideas how to make it using a ultra chill mill effect on the mill and stuff, so that I could make it just for myself. It wasn't about being selfish. It was more about I had to prove to myself it worked. That was
Yeah.
my point. So that was in January 2025. I started taking it and I stopped taking the cardopa that I was taking, which wasn't really working anyway for me. And I told my neurologist this is what I was doing. And they're like, well, okay. I mean, remember that honeymoon effect is going to last anyway. So go for it. Within a few months of going back to my neurologist, she says, you're a little better. Keep taking whatever you're taking. It seems to be working. So I had the sort of the salute from not the military this time, but neurologist who said, go for it. And I stuck with it. And I was at stage three Parkinson's. So it's one step literally away from a walker. I mean, I was really bad at that. I also carried the gene for Alzheimer's and was feeling that coming on. So I had actually lost my way home. I couldn't figure out how to get back home, drive in my car, and I knew I was in trouble. And I'm too much manly and too much Marine in me. So I didn't press, Google and say, take me home. Just kept driving until I ran out of gas almost. But I found a couple roads that seemed similar, made the right turn, and there was home. That scared me to death. I mean, it just frightened me that, now I've got Parkinson's, now I've got Alzheimer's, and I'm in a terrible situation here. So I continued on my interest in trying to get that product to work for me. And I started, like I said, taking it in January. In June of 2025, I signed up for the Michael J. Fox Marathon in Washington, D.C. Never ran or jogged in my life. And I ran that entire 2-mile run and got a medal at the end.
Wow,
And
that's cool.
it was like you just knew, I mean, it was like intervention where it just popped into your head that supernatural force of I did it. But what more importantly for me at that stage and for others were people around me that had Parkinson's say, what in the world are you taking? Because I'm wearing all the Parkinson's garb. I've got the orange hat was important that shows you're a Parkinson's person and everything. And my first sale was literally right there. And I said, look, I don't even have a label for the jar. I mean, it literally looked like this. This is the actual one of the first jars that I
Yeah,
sent
right.
out. It has nothing on it. And I had people at that thing going, I'll buy it. I'll buy it. And so just let me know. Send it to me. And so they were some of the first people that started using it besides me. I knew I was getting better every month. I had already done a really advanced Parkinson's test and a amyloid beta test, which is a blood test that sees the amyloid beta ratio in your blood. According to Google, that cannot be moved. Once you go to that, you never go back. My doctors told me you don't go back. So they wouldn't rerun the tests. I kept saying, I feel better. this is working, I think, but rerun the test. I had to call 10 online doctors, and eventually I got one who said, "Oh, I don't care. I'll run the test for you. I'll get you your prescription. Just go to the lab and get it done." I said, "I want it done at the same place I got it done before, the same test number. I don't care if there's newer ones out there. I need it to be exactly the same." And that's exactly what they did. And I moved that needle 10% better for Alzheimer's, showing the amyloid beta was changing in the blood, meaning it was getting out of the brain. And then I knew I was on to something. I had proof that I was on to something, and not just clinical, but now I had blood work that would back me up. And I just saw my neurologist about a week ago, and she put me through all the tests. And she goes, "I really honestly cannot say that you have Parkinson's right now. And it's just not there. You're doing everything right, like you're supposed, like a patient that would come in here who has below stage one." So I won't call it a cure. I can't call it a cure, but it's certainly a reversal. And you see me, I'm pretty sharp here now, and I have Alzheimer's. Not really. Okay,
Mm.
that's clear. So I guess what's the second mouse?
Mm.
I didn't mind that. I mean, sometimes things they use on mice don't convert over to human, but this did. And so I really got involved in the business part of it, the entrepreneur side, the spirit to try to get everyone else to try it to see if it would work. And I started noticing odd things on the website that I built. MyBrainRestored.com is the website where people can go and read all about me and all my medical information, but also order the product. And what I started noticing was that there were DRs in front of the name of people ordered. And I was like, wait a minute, these are
Ooh.
doctors, all right? So I got a hold of one, and I talked to him. And he goes, "Yeah, I'm a neurosurgeon, retired with Parkinson's." Okay, and I'm
Uh,
like, "Why are you buying it?" He goes, "Because nothing else works." I know that, but I know if you give the chance for the brain to heal, it will. And your system is working, and that's why I'm ordering it. That's why I'm getting it. So that was really a pat on the back to have someone like that get involved in it. And since that time, I've had just emotional stories from people who call me and say, one lady was so nice, and she also was a doctor but a PhD, and she did walking nature trail for her Parkinson's with her husband. She always held his hand because she said the rocks were unstable and things like that. So she always had to hold his hand. She goes, "After taking your product for about 3 months, I let go of my husband's hand. And I walked that trail back home by myself." And she goes, "It's just amazing. I never want to miss it. Make sure I always get it." And we have subscription. But I kind of comically said, "Well, I didn't mean to break you and your husband up. But you guys not holding hands." But it's really amazing because I get to talk to all these people. We put our phone number up there. A lot of times I answer the phone or one of my assistants. We don't use AI to answer the phone. We want to talk to everybody. We want to be involved in them a lot because this is very important. And there are caregivers out there that are faced with this dilemma of what do I do? One of my best friends died of Parkinson's and dementia with Lewy bodies. And if I had had this product, it probably would have helped him. But they put him on
yeah.
the worst chemicals, drugs I had ever seen. The side effects were
Mm.
outrageous. And to me, it wasn't so much about it being natural, but the fact that there weren't side effects. The side effects were nil, and no one really reported any side effects, except for a few now that have reported, "Wow, I've gotten more amorous, and I'm a Parkinson's patient. I shouldn't be doing that." I'm like, "Okay, that's a good
That's
thing."
a great side effect.
I wasn't going to bring it up, but since you did, and the point was that dopamine works on the brain. It works on the pleasure centers and things like that. So it kind of made sense that if you're producing dopamine naturally, you then realize, that other feelings are going to start to come into you. You're not going to have the hallucinations that people like that may have, or the depression that people like that have. And I didn't notice it right away, walking straight and strength, because I had hurt myself numerous times. I mean, I fell and knocked myself completely out one time. I mean, it was bad. But I went from that to not tripping, not falling, and being able to run. And then every month it just improved more and more. And now I'm 1 year into taking the product more than anyone else on the planet. And, it just works. That's all I can say. It simply functions for me and other people out there. And it's a game changer, to put it
Mm.
mildly.
What was the plan?
Say again?
What was the plant?
The plant,
No, no,
Ziziphus. The plant is Ziziphus. Yeah, ever heard of it?
Ziziphus. No.
No, me neither. I have never heard of it. Okay. But it was this particular, there's like 100 different species of that plant,
Mm.
and only one of them works.
Yeah,
So the
wow.
key was knowing exactly which one to get and how to obtain it. Somewhat rare in some degree, but it is out there, but it has to then be in a very cold environment. The mills that we use have to be chilled down very, very cold. We call it ultra chill mill. We gave it a name, and that's how we make it. So it keeps those components in, and it eventually turned into this, which you can see. So now it
Mm.
has all its labeling, its barcoding, and things like that. It's a supplement, okay. And then on here we put what it contains, and one big thing it fixes is this glymphatic system down here. That was
Mm.
something that the Dutch discovered. A Dutch scientist in 2012 actually discovered what he coined the glymphatic system, which is not the lymphatic system. It's a different system in the brain that drains things that are impurities out of the brain. Now it made complete sense. That explains why they dissected into mice. There was nothing in there. But the Japanese scientists didn't understand that point that the glymphatic system was there. They never read the Dutch report. It was never in the report. But then you read the Dutch report where they, something discovered in 2012 in medicine is really new. I mean, that's amazingly new. And then you realize, well, that system, what was happening was this natural product was working to get that system working again. It was getting it functioning. And that was what was clogging everything up. And that's why it worked across multiple neurological diseases. And even they said if that could be cleared up, it might help with traumatic brain injuries. It might help with other components in the brain, just getting it to start clearing itself. So we've so far only tried it with the 3 neurological diseases, but it looks like it could go much further than that. I have people
Mm.
buying it to take it for MS, even though MS is more of an insulin component around nerves. They're like, well, yeah, but it's affected by the brain also. So it might help. I think people get into situations like this where, and caregivers, and I watched my friend die, from Parkinson's and Lewy body dementia. He passed away from it. And he was chemically exposed too to Agent Orange, actually. I didn't want to see that happen anymore. I knew that I had something and it was important to get it out there, try to get it cost effective for everybody, but get them to understand it's not a miracle. You got to take it. It took me a year to get to this point to talk to you like this. I would have fallen out of the chair by now.
Mm.
But, other people that have started taking it have literally called me up and said, here's a plane ticket. I want to meet you. Come down here and I want you to meet my doctor. And sure enough, there's a plane ticket. They're like, get on a plane, go down. And I met with a bunch of people just recently that were just ecstatic about what was going on.
Wow, that's great.
No, it is. It's amazing. I look back at it. There's an analogy here back in Europe or in the British, if you think about it. The British sailed further and further out in what, maybe the 1500s, 1600s, something of that area, wanted to take over every country. Nothing new, right? And they basically, I looked up the numbers on it, and 2 million sailors had died in those trips that they went on out to sea. They didn't die of the sea. They didn't fall off the boat. They died of scurvy. And
100%.
scurvy is the lack of vitamin C.
Mm.
Very simplistic. Nowadays, we wouldn't think anything of it. Every store has it. But back then, 2 million soldiers over a 200-year period died, which is huge. And then somebody said, took lime on those boats. And that's how the British got to be called limeys.
I was going to say that.
Yeah, went to Australia and then turned it into a penal colony, right? Yeah, well, yeah. But, the point being is, there was something so horrible and horrific, but it took something so simple to fix it, but they couldn't see it, and they didn't understand it. And I think that's what's happened here, and unfortunately, although the Michael J. Fox Foundation and Parkinson's News and all these groups had mentioned these things, that this was done, a 1-page document, they didn't go any deeper than that, which surprised me. But again, it's not a drug, and they want to fund big drug companies. They don't really want to look at something like a supplement that's just as simple as fixing scurvy. That's unfortunate.
Well, you'd think with a supplement like this, you'd have Big Pharma knocking on your door to come and say, let's team up.
Well, yeah, you'd think so, but the reason the Japanese didn't do it was that although they had the natural ingredient, which they couldn't patent, by the way, you can only patent it if you put it in a blend or something like what we have. But the point was that they didn't see the $10,000 a month capability out of it. They didn't see that they could make huge amounts of dollars. And the Japanese scientists were still wrestling with every time they had thought they had gotten the right molecules or components of it. When they actually gave it to the mice, it never cured them at all. They never could isolate. So they quit. I mean, it was a supplement. And one sentence in that Japanese report by one scientist said, this should be a supplement. And no one did it. And that
Yeah.
part right there was like, wow, that's
Light,
amazing.
light bulb
Because they
moment.
didn't want to see
Yeah.
it die. They didn't. They knew their research was over. But, I'm afraid that happens to a lot of drugs, out there where they find things, but it's not to what they figure they could price it out for and make the most money. Most new drugs now, gosh, they come out there $5,000, $6,000 a dose sometimes. I mean, they're insane numbers. Okay.
Yeah.
There's nothing new that comes out that's cheap. Nothing.
Mm.
And so, you really have to look at that from a standpoint of, for me, I wasn't worried about that part. It was, how do I make it and how do I acquire it? How do I get it to people? And it's expanded now to, we actually gotten orders from like 6 different countries, and we're still working out the international shipping rules because some of those have changed. And obviously there's tariffs. The US is running around terrifying everyone and countermeasures, obviously, by those other countries. So it makes it a little harder to ship and a little more expensive. But in the US, obviously, we're selling it quite a bit and we've moved forward. We're up on Amazon right now. But by far, the best and easiest place to buy it from is from our website, mybrainrestore.com, because we support subscription capabilities. And again, they can call us directly. We can work with the people, and we do. It's
Mm.
something I like to do. I like to
Mm.
be on that front line, if you will.
Is this for
Okay.
everyone, or is there any people that are contraindicated in the use of this one?
Wow, I get that question quite a bit. Like, some people say, like, I have, stage 4 Parkinson's. Is it for me? I have one doctor who has a patient in hospice, of all things. I mean, he's not doing well, but he's like, I already talked to him. He said, give it to me. I don't care. I'll give it a try. And hospice usually can't give things to cure people, but because it's a supplement, the hospice doesn't care, and because it's not a drug. So we're hoping that he turns around. People have walked out of hospices before. So there's a possibility that that might actually happen. That would be fantastic if he did. But I have other people like caregivers and stuff like that who just are exhausted taking care of someone with Parkinson's or dementia or something like that. We look at actors, like Bruce Willis, and things like that, who have severe dementia, and other actors that, have passed away, that just, it shouldn't be that way. And there should be options. So my main thing was to make that option available. I think getting across the doctors is hard. They're used to 7 minutes with you, handing a pill to you. They've been handing out since the 1960s, and that's just what they do. I get it, but that doesn't mean can't think out of the box and we can't think forward into how do we get around these things. And that's really the discovery I've made. And I've backed it up with every bit of medical things and every test I can get involved in. I have done and posted on the website so everyone can see it. I don't hide it.
Would you recommend this as a future preventative for people that aren't experiencing any symptoms of Parkinson's?
Absolutely. If it is genetically, something in the family that someone had Parkinson's or Alzheimer's, then we do make a preventive version, which is it's the same product. It's just a lower dose. And the idea is to take it, every day. It's really easy. I mean, this is a powder. Okay. So when I open this up, it has a self-sealing foam jar. So that's foam right there. So you don't peel it off. Okay. And you don't peel this off because Parkinson's people can't peel that off with a pair of pliers. So we made it so the foam seal will reseal itself, keep this. And it's a very, very fine powder and it mixes in great with yogurt, pudding. I did this for a particular reason. Number one, was it palatable? Could I tolerate it putting it into this? And the answer was absolutely. But more importantly, you get into a dementia patient like my friend was. If he didn't like the food you handed him, he'd throw it across the room at you. They get a little ornery. And for a caregiver, it's just, like, what do I do? I said, feed him what they like to eat. you know, pick yogurt, pick applesauce, whatever, find out. Well, it has to be cold. Do not take it with anything hot because the scientists found out that destroyed it completely from its neurological capabilities. They also used it on mice at the end that were their control group. In other words, these were mice that didn't have any of those diseases, and they found they could run the mazes and what's called a water maze, where they put the mouse in a container of water and there's a ladder somewhere. And that ladder might get moved around, but the mouse has to figure out, how do I get to that ladder quickly? And they found that they increased a normal mouse's ability to get to that ladder by 20%. And that's substantial. That means it can be used for people maybe cramming for exams, or want better, sharper mind or something like that. It could be used for that. So I have also people using it for foggy brain, which comes from COVID. Long-term COVID is classical for that. Some people here in the US have gotten Lyme disease afterwards. They've gotten the foggy brain thing, and they're using it because they want to try to stop that. And they seem to be having good results. So, although that was never in this original experiments, we start to realize that glymphatic system is responsible for cleaning up the brain, and nicknamed the dishwasher of the brain, actually, by scientists. And so it seems like things that are stuck in there, it moves them out into the bloodstream where the liver can break them down just like it should. And I'll be honest with you, I'm 67 years old and I feel like I'm 30. You know,
That's awesome.
100%, jump out of bed
Mm.
and have a good time and run downstairs, and don't you keep falling downstairs. I'm perfectly happy.
That's a great result. Now, I was going to ask you, how long would you expect someone to commit before they can actually safely and clearly evaluate their own effect that they're
Sure.
experiencing? And what minimum data set would they actually have to collect to make that judgment?
Yeah, well, we actually encourage everyone, and we have it up on our website under our FAQ under free PDFs. They can download actually charts which allow them to chart out, and we encourage them every month to put a 10 for my worst day, walking, or my worst tremors or whatever. And we encourage them when taking the product to every 30 days have them or their caregiver reevaluate, try to figure out things. And we encourage them not to make mistakes, especially with things like memory components. Like, don't say, is the person in this picture Betty? Don't do that. Because most dementia patients and Parkinson's people, and Alzheimer's people say yes. They say yes to everything. I noticed my friend did it all the time. Yes. And I kept telling his wife, don't prompt him asking who's in the picture, right? Let him name them. And then we notice immediately he couldn't name them. And when you say, hey, your favorite actor is on the TV right now, who is it? I don't know. And when they say the name, when they pick the picture and say, yes, that's this person, you've beaten the memory component. But on the other side is, can they pick up screws or a coin from being on the ground? That's really, really hard to do for people with Parkinson's. The dexterity of the hand, I had what's called pill roll. So I'd pick up something, my hand would do that. So I'd drop it because my hand would pill roll. And that's an effect that happened. That doesn't happen anymore. I can pick up the smallest screw during the fall. Here it's winter now, but during the fall, I jumped on a 20-foot ladder, went all the way up and cleaned the gutters. My wife was freaking out.
I wouldn't even do that.
Normally, right? But that's how much my balance was back, and how much I
Wow, that's
walked in
cool.
the room. I knew what I was doing. You feel it, but it's always a good idea to quantify it. In other words, we encourage people to do that. We even encourage people, if they're willing, to take, videos of themselves. We have a couple people doing that now, as they are now. And then each month keep videotaping themselves to see if the video and thing catches them. Sometimes they have droopy head. They'll keep their head down like this and talk to you. They don't want to look up. Keep in mind, people with Parkinson's and these kind of diseases are depressed. They don't want to show people this. This is not something you want to go out in public with.
Mm.
And that bothers them a lot. So the fact that we get them out, we get them going and everything, and they're not depressed anymore because they're feeling better, that's huge. That's
Mm.
enormous. But yes, you do. We encourage that. We're going to work on an app so that the caregivers and maybe the Parkinson's people and Alzheimer's people could enter that data into an app so that they could see the results and scales and things of that order. Because everyone's different here.
Yeah.
Parkinson's affects people different. So I would say the hardest thing to get rid of is tremors. Mine has improved greatly, but it took a year, 6 months to run, 6 months for, strength and power. I think strength and power and balance are the first thing that comes into play, we've noticed, but tremors are very hard to shake off. Literally, don't mean that as a pun. um, that's a tough one. That my left-handed tremor still's there a little bit, but even my doctor was like, "I don't care about that. The rest of the test you pass, so I could care less about that little tremor." But I'm not going to stop taking it. I mean, I don't want this back, and I do believe if you don't keep that glymphatic system functional, it's just going to work its way back in. We've come in contact with too many chemicals over the years, all over the world,
We
and
all have.
these, yes, we
Mm.
all have it. There's no way to escape it. As a little kid, even when my father would always pick up his dry cleaning stuff, I was between two Marine uniforms in the back seat that smelled horrible. So it wasn't just the water, I mean, those things were TCE bound, but it's not the only chemicals. Now there are lawsuits going on about paraquat, which are used around farms. Harvard University was just doing a giant study about farms and industrial areas and people getting Parkinson's that lived around those farms and lived around golf courses and lived around industrial areas. So I don't think it's escapable. So if you have those things, the preventing comes into play to kind of stop it from happening in the first place. But if you're, already have these kind of conditions, then we have what we call active 2X, which is just 2X just stands for twice the dose. In other words, you get 2 jars of this instead of one. And it's the same formalization. We don't we don't make it different. And, that's just the way that it works. And you're taking really twice the amount. We've experimented myself on higher amounts. I notice I get a slight headache if I take a higher amount. So we like the 2X because it works. And we seem to have found what the human dosage would be versus the mouse dosage, which is kind of hard to do the math on.
And with your background in database programming, I think you would have thought of the idea of putting together a way of tracking everyone's data. So then you've got like an anecdotal clinical trial ongoing. Have you
Yes.
been doing that?
Yes, absolutely. No, the
Oh,
part of
nice.
the reason I went down to Atlanta, where I met with a group down there, was that's exactly what they want to do. Next to do
Yeah.
human trials and things of that order. And why they're asking, can you get some of your people to start filming themselves? Let's get that part started. The thing is, a lot of people don't have time to wait. For that. So they want to get in and start anyway. And I understand that. That makes sense. I did. I wasn't going to wait for my doctor to approve it. I was just said, I'm going to do it because what you're giving me, you already told me it's not going to work. What's the cure? None. Okay. Well, then we've solved that problem. But we are looking at that and trying to see how it, works so we can get more statistics and things like that. We can have testimonials of people doing videos and things like that, which we're already working on so that they can show that how they're doing better. Some people have very fast results from it, which even astounded me. Some of the people I met were like, one person had a dopamine pump. Okay, so they would have to hit, their dopamine pump. They said like every 3 hours just to function. This
Right.
is not where you're taking a pill with dopamine or cardopa, those type of things. This is a pump, which gives them. And they went from every 3 hours to every 6 hours, and now every 8 hours. So they're like, I know it's working because I could never do that before. So and I tell them to be careful because the one thing is that if the brain starts making its own dopamine again, then it's sort of like taking Ozempic and insulin at the same time. Your Ozempic's
Mhm.
already getting your pancreas working, but you can't take insulin on top of it. So you
Yeah,
have to
right.
wean yourself off the insulin because you get this imbalance, where the brain is kicking, or in this case, in Ozempic, when you take it, it all of a sudden wakes up the pancreas. It starts making its own insulin. Okay. And we don't have a way to meter things like that. And on my phone, I actually have the app. Okay, so I have diabetes. So there's my diabetes for the day. Those big spikes are food that I ate, and you see that nice spike come right back down. That's without
Yeah.
taking an ounce of insulin. I have one red component there, which means that the body, basically the pancreas, overdid it, but then it pulls sugar from the cells at that point. Okay. So
Yeah, right.
114, and I couldn't be drinking anything more healthy than cherry Coke. Okay. So, so for me, I mean, it's like okay, there's my score. This is live. I have a meter right here on my shoulder, but they do not have one for dopamine. So we have to be more careful with that and, tell their doctor that they're taking this, tell their doctor they need to wean themselves off of that because the brain's going to come in. And if you take dopamine on top of this, you're essentially double dosing yourself. Well, we just don't have a way to meter. Looked all over and nobody's built that and
Yeah.
probably won't. And if this product continues forward, they may not need to.
For someone who's newly diagnosed with early onset Parkinson's or mild cognitive impairment, what 5 actions should they take this?
Well, I think number one, to come to our website, My Brain Restore, and read my journey. I mean, I give away my book free. It's right there. People can go to that, click on free PDFs and download my 2026 version of the book. I got to update that because I just got the new medical information that came in. But it talks all about Camp Lejeune, how I got here, all the research I did. I did a massive amount of research. As you know, as a database programmer in the background, you have no clue what you're walking into when you go see a company. They just say, we want to build this database. Okay, what does it do? Well, we don't really know yet. Okay, well, that would help.
I used to be a programmer, and so many times the scope just did not exist.
Yeah,
Like, the marketing guy wants to do this, you know what I mean?
it's like, okay, let's try to put some things down on paper or on a blackboard or whatever, and let's scope it out as to where you're headed. And we built some of the largest programs for some of the biggest companies in the world and organizations. I mean, I was involved with the International Monetary Fund. Their entire system we ran it for 18 years. We did all the coding on it. It was massively huge. We did Charles Schwab, AOA. We did the Pentagon, things I can't talk about. Uh, but we started with that blank screen every single time. And we
Mm.
started with people not really knowing what programming would do for them. And this is in the early days. Like, well, what can we do? We don't know. What do you want to do? And with me, it's the same thing. Like, what do I want to do? I want to get rid of the diseases I have. And now everyone else who contacts me wants to get rid of the diseases they have, or at least put them in remission. If nothing else, shut them down, slow them down, because your doctor's not going to do it. He's going to assign FDA approved, drugs to you. And he's got that 7 minutes in the United States is the average time a doctor will spend with you. So listening to you is like, they don't care. And that's unfortunate, but it's just what it's become and what big pharma has. And, we have to remember that dopamine, and most people do not know this, came from a plant in 1960 from India. And for 1,000 years, the people in India knew it stopped tremors. It was only 100 years, I think it was 100 years ago, that a British scientist, if I'm not mistaken, had gone to India and rediscovered that, hey, this is a cool plant. And they were able to synthesize the dopamine from it. And that's how that got started. But it came from a plant the same way.
Mm.
Here, they just couldn't figure it out. So to me, it's take the plant.
Yeah. What daily routine do you have now when it comes to dosing, exercise, sleep, and cognitive habits?
Sure. Well, the first thing I did, keeping in mind I have two different diseases. I have Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, both confirmed. So I always joke with people. I say, well, I have Parkinson's. I fell down the steps and hurt myself, but because I have Alzheimer's, I forgot I fell down. Yeah. People are like, yeah. But what I did was when I felt really strong in Alzheimer's, I went to Amazon.com and I got this game, the matching game for kids who match, the two raccoons in there, there's two lions, and they're just little, cards. Okay. And so they look like this. And when you turn them over, they look like that. So you can't tell. You put out 36 of these and you got to remember where they're at. An Alzheimer's person really can't do that. I played my wife. I said, I think I'm feeling better. I think my Alzheimer's has gone away. I want to test it. That little $12 game I set up, and she's 15 years younger than me. She's quite sharp. And she goes, I'm going to beat your socks off. You're not going to have a chance. And I said, okay, let's go. And when we got done, I won, and she won't play anymore. And that's what you look for. You test yourself. In other words, what things couldn't I do prior? You have to set your own goals, into this. But you have to look at some goals like Tremors might take an incredibly long time, over a year to get rid of, taking this product. But other things you're going to see, and you just have to be realistic about it, not stop. Okay. Make sure you're taking it. Mix up your pudding one day, say, whoop, pudding, I'm taking it. One day I'm using some applesauce the next day, and the next day I'm putting in an instant breakfast drink. I have one guy who drinks it just with water. I don't get that one, but he likes it that way. It's whatever works for you and you don't get tired of. Because anything like this, doing it every day can get annoying. So mix up what you mix it with, and use that and set a timer for yourself to take it mainly in the afternoon or mainly in the evening. And the reason for that is that glymphatic system does most of its work when you sleep. And sleeping is a hard thing for Parkinson's patients. That could be very difficult. And grandpa likes sitting in his chair and he's got his head up and he's taking this, then make sure he takes it before he takes his nap. Okay. Because that's when the glymphatic system is going to be at its most. It waits for the body to shut down and then it starts cleaning itself. It isn't unusual for a lot of systems in the body to do. They do a lot of repair at night when you're not active because that takes less energy. And this is no different. So I even got a wedge pillow. I tell people buy a wedge pillow. The system works on a drainage type system. So if you get a wedge pillow, which is, that sort of V-shaped pillow that prompts your head up a little bit better when you're sleeping, that's going to help a little bit more. And I have that also. So we do a lot of things to tell people to do. And once they start doing them, they find they get better results.
So, Mark, what's one concept that you'd like every listener or viewer to remember at the end of this episode?
Wow, I just, don't give up. Don't give in. That's what I did. Don't stop. If something can work, give it a try, but you have to give it a fair try. I took all the supplements I could find that were supposed to be good for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's prior to this. Trust me, I was trying everything. Nothing worked. Nothing did what this did. So for me, that was like the game changer. And I still take some of those other supplements, but when I did my 6-month test, I just took this pure, you know, just to make sure it was working. So I didn't get any side effect component from something else. I had to know that it was doing heavy lifting, if you will. So I think the takeaway is you have to commit yourself to it. That's why we have a subscription system. We automatically from our website send the product to you. It'll replenish each time and go out. We ship by priority mail in the United States, so it's 2 to 3 day delivery time. Overseas depends on overseas where it's going and everything like that. But those can take longer. But we don't have as much control over that. But eventually, we'll probably set up distributors in different countries that can bring it in and then distribute it into that country a little easier. So we'll get there. But, I guess for me, it was not giving up hope. And for caregivers, it's an incredible relief. I had one caregiver who called me a couple days ago and just was like, oh my God, my husband's so much better. I don't have to wait on him hands and foot as much. Every time he whines and moans, he doesn't whine and moan. He just gets up and does it himself. And I'm like, is that good for you? She goes, good, fantastic. We have to think about the caregivers involved here. They get worn out. That's a tough job. And it's a tough job watching someone you love, literally go downhill and not be able to get out of it. I've seen it, firsthand, and it's brutal. So for me, I think it's important that people use it, stick with it, give it 6 months to a year time. You're going to see differences, but they're going to be different for each person. You just got to write it down so you can say, yes, this is working. You're going to notice it. And I didn't notice it since I was the first person taking it. I didn't really have anyone to talk to. And when I first started not falling and not tripping, honestly, I felt normal and I didn't even think about it. I didn't until I went back and said, wait a minute, I haven't tripped in a week. I didn't fall downstairs. I didn't take a sharp corner. Wow, that's amazing. But it took me a couple of months to realize that part, and I think that's where it helps the people make a law and be able to say it's working. If it's not working, then they shouldn't buy it anymore. Definitely. But I think they'll all see changes. So far, no one has dropped their subscription at all. If anything, they're calling in and giving me good results and thumbs up and everything. And we're excited about what its potential is. It's huge.
Mark, so where can people find your products? You've actually said your URL a few times there, but I'd like to get that stamped into the end of the show here.
Yeah, it's mybrainrestore.com. and I named it after what it did for my brain. My brain is for, okay? And the company is called APDI. And so you can also go to apdi.com, but most people get those letters mixed up. And either one will go to our site. From there, I encourage them first to read everything, go to my journey, read all about me, read all my medical facts that I put up there before making a purchase. If they have active situation, they should definitely do 2x active and get the subscription. And for your listeners, they can use a code called ebook 10, which is in the book. And if you put in ebook and then number 10 as one word, then it'll assign a 10% discount on it.
Oh, nice. Thanks for that.
And we do that for everyone to try to help them.
Yeah. Mark, it's been a pleasure talking to you and hearing your story. And I mean, that's quite a big cross to bear, but you've actually taken that and run with it in the really appropriate way to help not only yourself, but many others. So all power to you. This is fantastic.
Absolutely. I smile and wake up every day smiling. I'm so encouraged that I'm helping people, and people that I watched before die, and now they're not. So to me, that's huge, that I can help mankind, womankind, and caregiver kind. It's a massive families, it's huge. Absolutely huge. I love it.
Yeah, many blessings to you. Thank you very much for coming on the show.
I appreciate you having me.
I can't imagine what it would have been like being born into a body and then by no choice of your own being polluted so severely that your body begins to shut down in ways that modern society sees as Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and early onset dementia. That would be terrifying for most people. To hear Mark's story, how he conquered that through his own in-depth study and research, and then taking that to the nth degree and producing a product that actually works, that he tested upon himself, that's amazing. And now the fact that he's helping so many people across the world, it seems like he was born just for this. What a great story. If you've enjoyed today's show, please like and subscribe. That'd be appreciated. And if you're on a podcast app, give me 5 stars and share this one to a friend that might need to hear about this product and Mark's story as well. Thank you so much. And you may enjoy this episode as well.